How to Embrace Diversity and Inclusion in a Post-COVID World by Asif Sadiq. Asif will explore how recent events from COVID to Black Lives Matter have showcased more than ever the importance of diversity and inclusion and why companies need to embed D&I into all elements of their business, and why D&I is not just an option now, but a business imperative, one that can yield more productivity, creativity, and profits, and how companies can ensure that they engage with more diverse customers and create products that are truly inclusive of all. He will also dive into the importance of D&I within digital and how to build digital offerings that are truly diverse and inclusive for all users, looking at the importance of D&I at the design stage in order to prevent potential biases within systems. Please welcome Asif Sadiq.
Hi everyone, hopefully you can all hear me. My name's Asif Sadiq. I am the Global Head of Diversity and Inclusion here at Adidas. And I wanted to spend half an hour or so just sharing some of my experiences with you, sharing some of my knowledge around all the different changes and all the different things that we're currently seeing within the world when it comes to D&I. And also hopefully some experiences from my past. So prior to Adidas, I've worked for the Telegraph Media Group, championing their work around creating a more inclusive strategy and diversifying their business into the digital space, as well as working for Ernst & Young, heading up diversity and inclusion for Europe, Middle East, India and Africa. And prior to that, working for the police service, heading up diversity and inclusion. So before I start, I wanted to really touch upon one of the important things that throughout this sort of presentation, I'll share with you various different sort of thoughts, and we might not agree on everything. And I think that's the beauty of diversity. That's one of the big things we must acknowledge and understand, that diversity doesn't mean that we all have to think the same. It's about understanding each other's differences. It's about acknowledging that diversity means different things to different people, and what role do each and every one of us have to play within that, and how can we be respectful of those differences. But I think the first big thing is, what do we mean by diversity and inclusion, and this concept of belonging, which I'm going to touch upon. So if I asked you about diversity and what diversity means, you'll probably tell me it's about the differences. We'll probably refer to groups like gender, ethnicity, LGBTQ, disability. These are the sort of traditional categories of diversity. And I think there's two key things to remember when we look at diversity in that respect. Number one, no one is one particular element of diversity. And I think that's quite evident. Every single person has their own unique identity. And to truly understand what diversity means, we need to start valuing people from that diverse perspective. But when we look at it from a traditional perspective of what organizations have done in the 15 odd years I've been looking at this, you're almost assigned identity when you join an organization. So, you're either seen as a woman, you're either seen as someone from an ethnic minority background, and so on. And that's not useful. And I think the second element to that is that when we only look at diversity, it doesn't mean anything. So if you said, 20% of your workforce is female or 30% of your workforce is female, my question to you would be, what does that mean? Because just being female doesn't enrich your organization. It doesn't create better productivity, better output. So the key thing is that diversity by itself doesn't solve anything. It's just a measure. And I'm not saying we don't need it. We do need it, and it should be there. But really and truly what's important is, how do we move from diversity to the next stage, which is inclusion? And what do we mean by inclusion? Well, inclusion is this element of, that you've now been able to, you've got your diversity, but you feel included. And inclusion as a concept is great. And you hear a lot of organizations talking about, the importance of inclusion, why inclusion matters. But I truly believe that inclusion by itself, again, does not achieve the desired objectives we want. And let me put that in context for you as an example. So you've got a board within an organization, an executive board, let's say predominantly made up of men. Now, on the board, you have a new appointment, and it's a female who joins the board. That is great. You've now got a female, so you've got the diversity, you've now got the inclusion piece, because she's now part of the board. But the real question is, does she have a sense of belonging? And that's where the concept of belonging comes. So to truly get the best results out of diversity and inclusion, we need to create a sense of belonging for people within an organization. And why is that important? Well, there's many, many layers as to why it's important. But when people have a sense of belonging, they are more productive. They're more innovative. They feel they can be their authentic self, so they end up staying longer with organizations. And all these elements are hugely, hugely important. So when you look at the concept of belonging, I just want to talk through how do we get to those stages. So I've mentioned the fact that we measure the diversity, we create the inclusion, and then we move on to the space of belonging. But what role does each and every individual play in creating that belonging? I think that's one of the really, really important things that we all need to address. And now the question you're probably thinking, that's all great. I get the journey from diversity, inclusion to belonging. But why? Why is diversity and inclusion important? Why should I care about diversity and inclusion? And it's a question that you hear a lot, or you used to hear a lot. Well, the first thing is recent events globally have showcased the importance of the whole diversity and inclusion agenda. So if we take the pandemic, it's highlighted how important flexibility has been. Interestingly, the concept of working flexibly has been around for a long time. Diversity professionals have been pushing that concept for many, many years. But we were almost fast forwarded into this space where we had to embrace it. And a lot of organizations have, and it's been a journey that could have been easier if we had started work on it before. But it's created a new environment for work, a new environment that needs a different way of, or a different set of challenges. Recent events in North America, the Black Lives Matter movement have again highlighted where there's been marginalized groups, or groups that traditionally haven't had equity, even within the diversity spectrum. So when we've talked about diversity, we haven't created equity for certain marginalized groups. And that's been highlighted, and it's created movements, it's created shifts across numerous organizations. And now, of course, there's a huge element about the legal implications of not getting diversity right. So in the UK, for example, you've got the Equality Act. In various other countries, you've got other legal legislation that protects people from discrimination, that protects people from not being treated fairly within the workplace. That's there. Then you've got the next element, which is all about the moral case, which many people get now. And as I said, recent events have highlighted again the importance of that moral case, why we all have a duty to do something, why organizations need to shift to understanding what happens outside of their workplace is also important to their people as we deal with so many different elements of diversity. Because as I said, diversity traditionally was a few things that we looked at, but now you've got age diversity, you've got neurodiversity, you've got diversity of cultures, you've got diversity of nationalities. There's so many different elements, and these are all unique, but it's the moral case is huge. But what's really, really big, and one of the things I really wanted to touch upon, is the business case. And why I say that is the business case has been around for a very, very long time. It's not a new concept, but people haven't necessarily understood it well enough, or no one's really embraced it from a business perspective. And there's a few organizations that have, but now I think a lot of organizations have come to the realization that getting diversity wrong costs you money. Either you end up with products or product design that in itself is biased, or you risk reputational risk, so you end up with a situation where your reputation could be damaged. And if you get it right, you could increase profits. And I want to put that into a few sort of examples for you. So this is the external piece. So let me take my example of when I worked at the Telegraph Media Group. For those of you who know the Telegraph Media Group, it is a traditionally centre-right newspaper. Their readership is predominantly white, is predominantly affluent, and is predominantly of the age group of between 55 and let's say 75. Now they realized that, month on month, their readership was reducing. As naturally people pass away, they had less and less readers. So they had to reinvent themselves. And that meant that they had to look at how do you diversify your offering? How do you go into the digital space? How do you create a footprint on social media so that people engage with you? How do you look at consumer trends that are changing? One generation will pay for a newspaper subscription. Younger generations will not. They can get news for free from Facebook. So how do you convince them? But these are new markets. These are opportunities that businesses can really embrace to create more profitability, better engagement, and really more success. But then on the flip side of that, you've got numerous examples where when companies get it wrong, it has huge implications, especially in the design stage, especially when diversity is not built into the processes of design and doesn't start off at a very early stage within an organization. And I just want to give you a few examples to really bring it to life around what I mean by that and what that really and truly means. So, for example, there was a recent report in America around driverless cars, which is supposed to be the new big thing. We're all going to have cars which can drive themselves. The report highlighted, they did some research and found that if you were of darker skin, you were 20 times less likely to be picked up by a driverless car. The reason? The designers who started building that hadn't considered different skin tones. Huge concept error, huge issue if it had gone, or when it does go into production, if they don't rectify it. It seems quite simple, and it seems like, well, why would we not have solved, or why would they not have thought about it? Well, it's not that they went out or set out to intentionally miss out on people who are of darker skin. But if you do not have the diversity within your design teams, diversity of thought within product concept, you will never end up with a product that's fit for everyone. Similarly, we all know YouTube, huge platform, people upload videos. I remember a couple of years back, they created a new platform to upload videos. And in a few hours, they found something like 500,000 videos upside down. When they looked into it, what they discovered was that if you were left-handed and you uploaded a video, it ended up the wrong way around. And that error only came about because the design team didn't have anyone who was right-handed. So it caused huge challenges and issues, and that could have been prevented with the right amount of diversity within the team. And you've also heard, of course, of some of the big fashion brands who've got things wrong, who either designed something which is been, people have seen it as being racist, or it's offended people, and those kind of things. I guess no one can afford, or no company can afford to have those challenges. But more than anything, when as organizations, as we move into this new digital era where we're transforming ourselves onto online spaces and so on, we need to try to attract more diverse customers as well. So it's not only about retaining your customers, but it's also about diversifying your sort of revenue streams and meeting more customers. And just the last example on that, because it comes to mind, I was speaking to a colleague of mine who's from the LGBTQ community, and he was telling me recently he tried to go online to book a holiday for himself and his husband, and he went on to one of these websites where you can look at holidays, package holidays and so on. And this website recommended him holidays in countries where it's illegal to be gay. And he found it hugely offensive, and he left the website and he didn't book with them. And that's a customer lost, and that's the kind of thing we need to start designing and thinking of things and thinking of the implications. Same with disability. If you have a disability and you're trying to book a holiday, how many websites can you name for me, holiday websites, that will also cover disability access, or will give you opportunities to understand if you have a physical disability, how easy it would be for you to be able to navigate your way during your holiday. None of that's covered, and these are kind of things which are crucial. So diversity is a huge, and inclusion is a huge element of any business when you look at it from a profitability, reputational way. But more than anything, the piece which is really important is also the internal element. So the productivity, the innovation, the drive, and if you look at this slide in particular, team collaboration goes up by 57%, and this research has been done by a number of organizations, including the Corporate Leadership Council. But 57% better team collaboration, 19% retention, more market share, success in new markets. These are all things every organization aspires to. I mean, the recruitment costs of continuously recruiting staff is huge. So if we can get our staff to feel more included, if we can create an element or a workplace where people can perform at their best, we're going to have the best ideas, the best solutions to problems. And that's what every organization should be aiming and working towards. So it's a huge benefit to any organization. I get asked a lot about, well, you say all this is great, but diverse teams are disruptive. Diverse teams are challenging. 110%, yes, they are. But that's because they're disrupting the normal patterns we have. If everyone thinks the same, you'll never get anyone giving you a different opinion. Anyone breaking down the conversation say, what about this? But once you have truly diverse and inclusive teams managed well, in the long run, you've got great team collaboration, better problem solving, and better output. And I think that's where we need to really and truly get to. Now, how do we do this? What's the big solution to creating a more inclusive workplace? And I'll touch on four things that I believe are hugely important, and this is from experience having worked in numerous organizations. I think the first is disrupting normal processes. Diversity doesn't mean you have to go out and buy this new fancy program or this great initiative that you implement internally. It's about going through your processes and breaking them down to see how can you make them better. It's about weaving diversity in to what you do every day. So you don't do it from the side of your desk. It's part of every single piece of work that you do. So it's something that's naturally comes to us rather than we think about afterwards. And also, we won't fix anything if we continuously just cover it with short-term solutions. We have to really get to the root of the problem. So if we're not attracting diverse talent, we need to break our recruitment process up. We need to look at where are the gaps within recruitment. Is it that we're not attracting? Is it that we're attracting and we're losing people at the interview stage? Is it that we're losing people at the offer stage? Or what is the challenge? And once we understand that, we can then better find solutions and fix the problem or the root cause of the problem to really end up with a better solution. The next piece is about mindset, and I think this is a hugely important piece. Diversity and inclusion is about everyone, every single person. This concept you might have heard diversity people talking about that, diversity is only about certain groups, or white men, straight men are excluded, is false. Everyone brings some element of diversity. You might have overrepresentation of certain elements of diversity than others, but no one can state that a particular group doesn't have any diversity. And that's really, really important, because we need to make sure our whole workforce understands that diversity and inclusion is about each and every person. And that's the only point at which you'll see true change within an organization, when everyone buys into the concept, everyone understands that getting diversity and inclusion is of benefit to every single person. Because if people feel excluded, they will not take part, they will not engage, and you will not find the momentum or movement you need. When you look at gender equality, gender parity, there was a recent report that said we've even gone further back. It's going to take even longer for us to achieve gender parity. I think the last time I looked at it was 2057 or something like that. Why is that? It's because women are the only ones really championing gender parity and gender equality. If men started backing the concept as well, you would see huge changes, right? And actually, the role of a man has changed. Men are now a lot more involved when it comes to family life. Men have caring responsibilities for younger kids, and the generations are changing. So many things are changing, but you need them to embrace it from their point of view. There was a recent report in the UK which Santander, the bank, and Business in the Community did, which interviewed something like 10,000 men. And 76% of those men said if they could not work flexibly and manage their home work-life balance, they would leave a company. That's huge. But if men embrace those elements, they work more flexibly, work part-time, then it will automatically have a positive impact on women as well. So it's examples and things like that. We need to get everyone to be championing the change we want to see. Support underrepresented. It's really important for us to acknowledge, I could have written support women, I could have written support people from minority backgrounds. Underrepresented, the reason I write it is that you have to follow the data. You have to understand, what does underrepresented look like? Within tech, it might be women. Within HR, it might be men. Within leadership, it might be women of color. And there's so many different nuances to it, but we have to understand, where is it that we can have the most impact? Where is it that we have challenges? Rather than this blanket approach across an organization that we will focus on one element of diversity, which will solve everything. So we really need to start thinking about, where is the underrepresented? What does it look like? And how can we benefit from having more diversity there? And the final point on that is really and truly around diversity. In all honesty, and I say this to each and every one of you, is not this huge complex formula, as much as many diversity professionals will try to sell to you. Diversity is the simple things. It's the simple things that each and every one of you can do to make a difference. You can run the biggest programs and they will not have the desired outcome and impact that you might want. But doing the small things, like saying hello to someone you haven't said hi to, having lunch with someone you've never had lunch with at work, sitting next to someone who you've never sat next to. Those small things can have a much bigger impact and create a much bigger change within an organization. It's the small things that lead to that sense of inclusion, that sense of belonging, that sense of that I can bring my authentic self to work. So how do we all embrace this change? So what can everyone, and I say inclusive leadership, everyone's a leader, everyone has a role and a responsibility to lead inclusively. But what is it that we can do? And I'll reflect on even certain events that have taken place over the last couple of months. The first big thing is that we must think inclusively. We cannot think only from our perspective, we need to think more broadly. We must learn inclusively. We must be ready to listen. We must be ready to hear views and opinions that are different to ours. And then we must translate that into ourselves acting inclusively. So how do we display authentic leadership? How do we really start to embed the change that we want to see? And the biggest thing is, we don't have to have the answers. Showing vulnerability as a leader has more of a positive impact than always having the right answers. So standing up and saying, I don't know what the best solution is right now, or I don't know enough about some of the challenges we face from a race perspective, is fine. Showing that, staff will value that. Staff will be more engaged. Staff will be ready to listen. We don't have to be perfect in diversity to talk about it. Leaders need to embrace it from a personal perspective and also show that they're human. The amount of leaders I've seen in recent years who will never talk about themselves, never talk about anything personal to them. They'll give you the big corporate statements without any information on them. Your staff want to see leaders who are human like them. They want to see leaders who do things like them. The moment you showcase that to your staff, to your colleagues, people will engage better. That's what we do as humans. But if you cannot see someone as being human, how will you trust them? How will you believe in them? And how will you listen to them going forward? So it's really important for us to show that genuine, authentic leadership and vulnerability, and create psychological safety for our staff and for our colleagues, so that people feel that they can speak up and we can live and learn from each other. We can have different opinions. I've always felt that, I get asked a lot of times, where are you from? And I used to say London, and people would still want to know, where am I from? And I'm actually originally from Kenya. And I don't have a problem with someone asking me that, but it's how people ask, or the intent with which people ask. So, people don't get offended when people's intent is right, but it's how do we do that? How do we engage and discover more about each other in a respectful manner without forming judgment or opinion on what they're saying? So those are some of the big things that we can all do, some of the changes that we can all embed as leaders going forward. And the final point is just around, for any outcome within the diversity and inclusion space, as people go on this journey, it is important to embrace it as a business objective. Embrace it in a way that we can do this from a business sense. That's key. You can't look at diversity as a nice thing to do. It has to be embraced as a business imperative for there to be true success. And just very quickly, there's different elements of diversity that have better success than others. I will just touch on one of the things here which I think are important. The first one being diversity training or unconscious bias training that you hear a lot about. By itself doesn't bring about change. Training or change within this space has to be consistent, has to be a continuous learning journey, and will eventually result in more positive change in the long run. And sorry, just one final thing that I wanted to also touch upon within that is also things like, when you look at mentoring. Mentoring is important. You hear the concept of that we need to mentor diverse staff, we need to showcase more, but more important than that is sponsoring. How do we sponsor talent that's different to us? How do we create more momentum? How do we, and what do I mean by sponsorship? Sponsorship is the concept of vouching for someone when they're not in the room, being more able to give projects to someone who's different to really help their career journey. That has a bigger impact. Harvard did a piece of research that showed 95% of your leaders have achieved the success they have because someone sponsored them. So it's looking at traditional things and looking outside the box to see how you can have the biggest impact within this space. And finally, just to touch on the last piece, I've mentioned a few different things, but there's huge values, challenges, and risks when it comes to diversity and inclusion. And I just wanted to list some examples of things that can work, things that can change, things that can improve and support diversity. But if anything, from what I've said, and it's always hard in half an hour to explain numerous elements of diversity, but I think it's important as we transition as organizations into the digital space, technology is taking over many parts of our lives, changes in the world around us, the flexible working and so on, that we must acknowledge that we need to think outside the box. We need to value diversity into design, into our thought processes, and also acknowledge that what is right for one person isn't necessarily for the other. Working flexibly and working from home, some people have really enjoyed it and embraced it and felt that it's been really liberating. But I also know of others who've hated it those who it's had a huge psychological impact on. Younger people who share accommodation with others have found it very difficult to work from home. So there's so many challenges. There's not one size in diversity that fits everyone. But as long as we keep an open mind and move forward in that way, then we're able to really and truly bring about change in this space. I'll stop there because I wanted to leave some time for questions as well, and to answer any questions that you might have. Bear with me.